The microphone crackles to life at Seoul National University Hospital's press conference. But Dr. Sarah Williams isn't ready for the question that's about to destroy her career. Flash photography explodes as she steps to the podium, her hands trembling against the prepared statement she'll never get to read. Dr. Williams. The reporter's voice cuts through the sterile conference room like a scalpel. Is it true that you were operating under the influence of prescription medication when 8-year-old Marcus Williams died on your table? The medical board members shift uncomfortably in their seats. The hospital administrator reaches for his phone. Sarah's brother Marcus, the boy's father, sits in the front row, his eyes hollow with the kind of grief that turns love into accusations. The investigation shows clear evidence of negligence. The reporter continues, holding up a manila envelope thick with documents. Opioid abuse, delayed reaction times, surgical errors that cost a child his life. How do you respond to charges that you killed your own nephew? Sarah's stethoscope, still hanging around her neck from her last shift, feels like a noose. The same instrument that once symbolized her calling to heal now represents every life she's failed to save, every family she's destroyed through her own weakness. She starts, but the words dissolve. Behind the cameras, Marcus stands slowly, his movement drawing every eye in the room. The brother who once looked at her like she could cure anything now stares at her like she's a disease. The envelope in the reporter's hand tears open, spilling photographs across the press table. Sarah unconscious in her car outside a pharmacy, pill bottles scattered across her apartment floor. The security footage of her stumbling into surgery 12 minutes late. Dr. Williams, the state medical board is prepared to file criminal charges. What do you have to say to the family you've devastated? Sarah's fingers find the plane ticket in her coat pocket. One way to Seoul, purchased in a moment of desperation when staying meant facing the consequences of what she'd become. The press conference dissolves into chaos as she walks away from the podium, away from her career, away from the last connection to a nephew whose smile will haunt her forever. But she doesn't see the reporter's satisfied smirk or notice how quickly the leaked documents appeared. The elevator doors close on the sound of her name being shouted by colleagues who trusted her, and Sarah Williams disappears from the life she can no longer bear to live. Have you ever run so far from your mistakes that you forgot who you were before you made them? What would it take to find your way back to the person you used to be? The October rain in Seoul turns Bukchon Hanak village into a watercolor painting, blurred edges and running colors that match the haze in Sarah's mind. She's been walking these narrow streets for 3 hours, her travel backpack heavy with everything she owns and nothing she needs. 2 months since the press conference. 2 months since she fled Chicago with her medical license suspended and her family's forgiveness hanging just out of reach. Seoul chose her because it was far enough away from the woman who used to save lives and close enough to Anonymous that she could disappear completely. The sound reaches her before she sees him, guitar strings weaving melodies that seem to understand the weight she carries. She follows the music down a stone pathway lined with traditional houses, their curved rooftops dark against the gray sky. He sits beneath a red umbrella outside a small cafe, fingers moving across the fretboard with the casual perfection of someone who's lived inside music his whole life. Park Min-jun, though she doesn't know his name yet, looks like poetry written in sadness, beautiful in the way broken things sometimes are. Sarah stops just outside his circle of music, rain soaking through her thin jacket while something inside her chest unclenches for the first time in months. When he glances up and sees her standing there, this foreign woman crying over a song she doesn't understand, his fingers pause mid-chord. "You're American," he says in careful English. his voice carrying the soft accent that makes Korean English sound like music itself. "I was," Sarah replies, the words slipping out before she can stop them. "Now I don't know what I am." Minjun studies her face with the same intensity he brings to his guitar, reading the story written in her exhaustion. "Sit," he says, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "The rain will get worse before it gets better." She should walk away, should continue her purposeless wandering through a city that doesn't know her name or her failures. But something in his eyes, a recognition of shared damage, makes her sink into the plastic chair and let the music wash over her like forgiveness she doesn't deserve. "What's your favorite song?" Minjun asks, his fingers finding a gentle melody. "I don't remember," Sarah admits. "I haven't listened to music in a long time." "Then I'll play until we find it." The first song is something classical, delicate and precise. Sarah shakes her head. The second is American pop, familiar but wrong. The third makes her close her eyes, but it's not quite right either. Then Minjun begins, the sound of silence, but transformed, slower, more contemplative, with Korean lyrics that somehow capture everything Sarah can't say about the quiet that's taken over her life. "That one," she whispers, and drops a crumpled bill into his guitar case before fleeing into the rain. But she hears him call after her in accented English. "Tomorrow? Same time?" Sarah pauses at the corner, Seoul's neon bleeding colors across the wet pavement, and for the first time in 2 months, she has somewhere to be. Sarah returns to the cafe the next evening like a pilgrim returning to a shrine. Minjun is already there, tuning his guitar with the same careful attention a surgeon once gave to preparing for operations. The comparison makes her stomach clench. "You came back," he says without looking up, but she can hear the smile in his voice. "I didn't have anywhere else to go." Neither did I. Now he does look at her, and Sarah sees something she recognizes in his dark eyes. The particular exhaustion of someone who's been running from themselves for too long. "I'm Minjun." "Sarah." The formalities feel strange after yesterday's emotional nakedness, but they're necessary. Building something requires foundation, even if that something is just 2 broken people sharing music in the rain. "Are you a doctor?" Minjun asks, gesturing to the stethoscope she forgot was still around her neck. Sarah's hand flies to the instrument, her fingers closing around it like a lifeline to a sinking ship. "I was. And now? Now I'm someone who carries medical equipment she has no right to use." Minjun nods as if this makes perfect sense. In his world of street corners and borrowed umbrellas, perhaps it does. "I was a concert pianist. Now I play for tourists and broken people who stop to listen." What happened? Same thing that happens to everyone, eventually. Life. He begins to play again. Something original this time. A melody that sounds like hope, fighting against despair, and occasionally winning. Sarah closes her eyes and lets the music fill the spaces inside her that have been empty since Marcus died. "That's beautiful," she says when the song ends. "It's unfinished. Like most things worth saving." The words hit her harder than they should. Sarah has been thinking about endings for months. The ending of her career, her relationships, her sense of purpose. But Minjun talks about unfinished songs, like they're promises rather than failures. "Can you teach me?" The question surprises her. Sarah hasn't wanted to learn anything new since she lost the ability to trust her own hands. Music? How to make something beautiful out of something broken. Minjun sets down his guitar and really looks at her. not the polite glance of a street performer acknowledging a patron, but the steady gaze of someone trying to decide if the person in front of him can be trusted with something precious. "Music doesn't fix broken things," he says finally. "It just makes them easier to carry. That's more than I have now." The rain intensifies, drumming against the cafe's awning with increasing urgency. Other pedestrians hurry past, seeking shelter, but Sarah and Minjun sit in their small bubble of shared understanding, neither wanting to break the spell of connection. "There's a piano at the community center," Minjun says quietly. "Tuesday evenings they let musicians practice. I could, if you want to try." Sarah thinks about the last time she touched piano keys, medical school, stress relief between studying for boards and clinical rotations. Her hands had been steady then, confident in their ability to heal. "I don't know if I remember how. Neither do I some days, but maybe that's where we start." The Bukchon Community Center smells like floor wax and decades of community gatherings. Minjun leads Sarah through hallways lined with children's artwork and announcements in Korean, their footsteps echoing off polished linoleum. The music room is small and warm, dominated by an upright piano that's seen better decades but still holds its tuning. A handful of other musicians are scattered throughout the space. An elderly man with a violin, 2 teenagers sharing a cello, a woman about Sarah's age cradling a flute like it's made of spun glass. "Everyone here is healing something," Minjun says quietly as he sets down his guitar case. "Music therapy without the therapy part." Sarah approaches the piano bench cautiously, as if the instrument might judge her unworthy and refuse to make sound. When she finally sits and lifts the fall board, the keys gleam like old teeth in the fluorescent lighting. "What should I play?" she asks. "Whatever wants to come out." Sarah's fingers find middle C, then the basic scales that are buried so deep in muscle memory they survived everything else she's lost. The sound is thin and uncertain at first, but the piano responds with patience, each note clear and forgiving. She moves into something more complex, a Bach invention she learned in college, when life was still full of possibilities and her hands were still trusted to do delicate work. The melody unfolds slowly, her fingers remembering pathways through the music, even as her conscious mind doubts every movement. Minjun starts playing along softly, his guitar weaving around her piano lines like a conversation between old friends. The other musicians pause in their own practice to listen, and Sarah realizes she's making music with strangers, something she thought she'd lost the ability to do. "Beautiful," the woman with the flute says in accented English when the song ends. "You play with much feeling." Sarah's eyes fill with unexpected tears. For 2 months, she's been nothing but her failures, her addiction, her devastating mistakes. But in this small room full of secondhand instruments and amateur musicians, she's simply someone making music. "I haven't played in years," she admits. "The piano remembers," Minjun says, "even when we don't." They play for another hour, moving through gentle classical pieces and contemporary songs transformed by the intimacy of the setting. Sarah's hands grow steadier with each piece, and something tight in her chest begins to loosen. "Do you know any Korean songs?" Minjun asks as they're packing up. "I don't speak Korean." "Music is music. I'll teach you the melody and you can feel the words." He begins something slow and haunting, his voice joining the guitar in Korean lyrics that sound like prayers. Sarah picks out the melody on the piano, her playing growing more confident as she finds her way into the emotional landscape of the song. "What does it mean?" she asks when they finish. "It's about second chances," about how sometimes the most beautiful things grow in the spaces where other things died. Sarah thinks about the garden her nephew Marcus was planning before he got sick, how he wanted to plant flowers in the corner of their backyard where an old tree had fallen. He never got to see if anything would grow there. "Minjun," she says as they're leaving the community center, "why do you play on the street instead of, I don't know, concert halls or recording studios?" He pauses in the doorway, his guitar case slung over his shoulder, and for a moment his composed mask slips to reveal something raw underneath. "Because concert halls require you to believe you deserve to be there, and some days the street corner is the only stage I can trust myself with." Sarah understands. For months she's been unable to trust herself with anything more consequential than walking through unfamiliar neighborhoods. But tonight, for the first time since Marcus died, she played music without her hands shaking. "Same time Thursday?" she asks. "If you want." "I want." The cafe near the community center becomes their regular meeting spot on non-music nights. Sarah orders the same thing every time: black coffee, no sugar, something bitter enough to match her internal landscape. Minjun drinks tea with honey and watches the street through rain-streaked windows. "Tell me about America," he says one evening, when the silence between them feels comfortable rather than weighted. "What do you want to know? Why you left?" Sarah wraps her hands around her coffee cup, seeking warmth in the ceramic. She's been avoiding this conversation for weeks, but Minjun's presence makes honesty feel less dangerous than usual. "I was a cardiologist, children's cardiology, actually, and I was good at it, really good. I saved kids that other doctors said couldn't be saved. But saving lives is stressful, and I started taking pills to manage the pressure. Nothing dramatic at first, just something to help me sleep, something else to help me focus. Then stronger things when the regular things stopped working." Minjun doesn't flinch or look away, doesn't offer empty reassurances or judgment. He simply listens with the same attention he brings to tuning his guitar. "My nephew Marcus got sick. 8 years old, congenital heart defect that we'd been monitoring since he was a baby. When he needed surgery, I insisted on doing it myself. I was his aunt. I was the best pediatric cardiologist in Chicago, and I loved him more than anything." The words stick in her throat. Sarah hasn't told this story to anyone. Not the investigators, not the reporters, not even herself in the quiet moments before sleep. "I was high," she says quietly. "Not falling down drunk or anything obvious, but my reaction time was slow. My hands weren't steady. And Marcus died because I couldn't save him fast enough to overcome my own impairment." Minjun reaches across the table and covers her hands with his. His fingers are calloused from guitar strings, warm despite the autumn air. "You didn't kill him," he says. "I might as well have. No, you loved him and you failed him. But that's not the same thing as killing him." Sarah looks up, surprised by the certainty in his voice. "How can you be so sure?" "Because," Minjun says, his own voice now carrying the weight of confession, "I know what it feels like to actually kill someone you love." The cafe suddenly feels too small, too public for the conversation they're about to have. But Minjun doesn't let go of her hands, and Sarah doesn't pull away. Her name was Ji-eun. We were engaged, planning a wedding for the spring. She was a violinist, first chair with the Seoul Philharmonic. We were going to make music together for the rest of our lives. What happened? I was driving. We were coming back from dinner with her parents, and it was raining just like tonight. I was upset about something stupid. Her father making comments about my family not having enough money, something that didn't matter at all. So I was driving too fast, and I was distracted. And when the other car ran the red light, Minjun's voice breaks, and Sarah can see him reliving the moment of impact. I walked away with bruises. She died at the scene. And every day since then, I've wondered if I could have saved her if I'd been paying attention, if I'd been driving more carefully, if I'd loved her enough to put her safety above my wounded pride. Sarah understands now why Minjun plays on street corners instead of concert stages. He's punishing himself the same way she's been punishing herself, choosing exile over forgiveness, penance over healing. But you didn't choose to crash, she says. Just like I didn't choose to develop an addiction. Didn't I? Didn't you? The question hangs between them like a bridge neither is ready to cross. They sit in the cafe drinking bitter coffee and sweet tea. Two people who've found each other through shared guilt and the gradual recognition that healing might require something more than endless self-punishment. The music helps, Minjun says finally. Does it? Some days. It reminds me that beauty can still exist even after terrible things happen. And it gives me something to do with my hands that isn't destroying. Sarah thinks about the way her hands feel on piano keys now. Uncertain, but improving. Damaged, but not beyond repair. Maybe that's enough, she says. Maybe we don't have to fix everything we broke. Maybe we just have to learn to carry it differently. Dr. Park Sung-ho runs the free clinic in Hongdae with the efficiency of someone who's learned to treat poverty as just another chronic condition. When Sarah volunteers her services, he doesn't ask about her medical license or why an American cardiologist is living in Seoul without legal work authorization. Can you take blood pressure? He asks in English, that's significantly better than her Korean. Yes. Can you bandage wounds without causing more damage? Yes. Can you show up consistently and treat people with dignity regardless of their ability to pay? Sarah hesitates. Consistency hasn't been her strong suit lately, and she's not sure she remembers how to treat herself with dignity, much less other people. I can try. Dr. Park nods as if this is exactly the answer he expected. We start Monday mornings at 7. Bring your own coffee. The clinic serves Seoul's invisible population. Undocumented workers, homeless individuals, elderly people whose families can't afford private health care. Sarah's first patient is a construction worker with an infected cut on his hand who speaks no English and regards her with polite suspicion. He wants to know if you're a real doctor, Dr. Park translates. Tell him I used to be, Sarah says, cleaning the wound with careful attention. Now I'm just someone who knows how to help. The worker nods at this translation, apparently satisfied. As Sarah bandages his hand, she notices that her fingers are steady, focused on the immediate task rather than spiraling into self-doubt. Good work, Dr. Park comments when the patient leaves. You have gentle hands. They used to shake all the time. And now? Sarah examines her hands as if seeing them for the first time. Now they're just hands. They're not perfect, but they're mine. The weeks develop a rhythm. Sarah volunteers at the clinic 3 mornings a week, plays piano with Minjun twice a week, and spends the remaining time walking through Seoul's neighborhoods like a tourist in her own temporary life. She's treating a grandmother's hypertension when Dr. Park mentions something that stops her cold. Your friend Minjun, he says casually while taking inventory of their medical supplies. He used to be quite famous. Concert pianist, recording contracts, international tours. Before the accident. He told me about the accident. Did he tell you that he hasn't played classical piano since? That he stopped performing entirely and moved to street busking because he believes he doesn't deserve success after what happened? Sarah sets down her blood pressure cuff and looks at Dr. Park with new understanding. You know him well. I treated him after the crash. Physically, he healed completely. Emotionally, Dr. Park shrugs. Some wounds take longer. Is that why you let me volunteer here? Because you recognize someone else who's healing from trauma? I let you volunteer because we need help, and you're qualified to provide it. But yes, I've seen enough trauma survivors to recognize the signs. The self-imposed exile, the rejection of anything that looks like your old life, the way you both flinch when people call you by your professional titles. Sarah realizes that Dr. Park has never called her Dr. Williams. To him, she's simply Sarah, a competent medical volunteer who happens to have advanced training. Does it get better? She asks. Define better. Does the guilt ever stop being the loudest voice in your head? Dr. Park considers this while organizing medication bottles. The guilt doesn't disappear. But eventually, other voices get louder. The voice of the patients you help today. The voice of the people who depend on you now. The voice that says, maybe your mistakes don't define your entire worth as a human being. That evening, Sarah finds Minjun at their usual spot outside the cafe. But instead of his guitar, he's sitting at the outdoor piano the cafe owner recently installed. A weathered upright that's seen better decades, but still holds its tuning. You're playing piano again, she observes. Just tonight, and only because you're here. Why does my being here matter? Minjun's fingers find a simple melody, something that sounds like a lullaby written for adults who've forgotten how to sleep peacefully. Because you understand what it feels like to have your hands betray you, and because you're learning to trust them again. If you can do that, maybe I can too. Sarah sits beside him on the piano bench, their shoulders touching as her fingers join his melody with a gentle harmony. Together, they create something neither could manage alone. Music that acknowledges damage without being defined by it. Dr. Park says you were famous once, Sarah says as they play. Dr. Park says you were brilliant once. Were we? Probably. But maybe we're something better now. What's better than brilliant? Minjun's playing grows more complex, and Sarah follows his lead, their four hands creating cascading melodies that rise and fall like conversation. Human, he says. Breakable, and repairable, and willing to keep trying. Are some wounds just scars that make us more human? When you've lost everything that defined you, what's left might be the most important thing you never knew you had. The memorial concert at Seoul Arts Center draws an audience Sarah didn't expect. Classical music enthusiasts, former students, and people who look like they're attending a funeral rather than a celebration. Minjun stands at the side of the stage, his guitar case clutched like a shield, watching other musicians perform pieces he used to play. You don't have to do this, Sarah whispers, as the pianist on stage finishes a Chopin nocturne that makes the audience lean forward in collective appreciation. Yes, I do. Why? Because Ji-eun would have wanted me to. Sarah hasn't heard him say his fiancé's name in weeks. They've talked around her presence, the accident, the guilt, the way grief can freeze a person in the moment of impact. But Minjun has avoided speaking Ji-eun's name, like it might summon her ghost. What was she like? Minjun sets down his guitar case and really looks at the stage, at the piano that's waiting for him to either claim or abandon. She was everything I thought I needed to be complete. Talented, ambitious, from a good family. When we were together, I felt like the person I was supposed to become. Successful, respected, worthy of attention. And now? Now I wonder if I loved her, or if I loved the version of myself I became when I was with her. The confession hangs between them like a dangerous truth. Neither is prepared to examine. Sarah thinks about her own lost relationships. Colleagues who respected her skill. Her brother who trusted her judgment. Her nephew who looked at her like she could fix anything. Maybe both things can be true, she says. Maybe. But I'll never know for sure because I killed her before we could find out what our love actually looked like when it wasn't performing for other people. The concert organizer approaches them with the nervous energy of someone trying to manage a potentially explosive situation. Minjun si, he says in Korean, then switches to English for Sarah's benefit. You're scheduled next? Are you ready? Minjun picks up his guitar case and walks toward the stage without answering. Sarah follows, her heart hammering with secondhand stage fright and the terrifying possibility that she's about to watch the man she's falling in love with destroy himself in front of 300 strangers. But when Minjun reaches the piano at center stage, something in his posture shifts. He sets down his guitar case and sits at the bench with the natural grace of someone returning home after a long exile. This is for Ji-eun, he says into the microphone, his voice carrying clearly through the concert hall. Who taught me that love isn't about becoming perfect for someone else. It's about becoming brave enough to let them see who you really are. The piece he plays is one Sarah has never heard. Complex, emotionally demanding, full of technical passages that require the kind of virtuosic skill that comes from years of professional training. But more than that, it sounds like autobiography written in musical language. Sarah watches from the wings as Minjun's hands move across the keys with increasing confidence, his body remembering what it feels like to be a vessel for something larger than personal guilt. The audience is completely still, held by music that manages to be both heartbreaking and hopeful. When the final notes fade, the silence stretches for several beats before erupting into applause that sounds like relief. Minjun sits at the piano bench, his hands resting on the keys, and Sarah can see tears on his face, even from her position off stage. That was beautiful, she says when he joins her in the wings. It was goodbye. To Ji-eun, to the version of myself that died with her, and hello to whatever comes next. Sarah understands. She's been carrying her own ghost. The brilliant cardiologist who could save anyone except her own nephew. The woman who had steady hands and unwavering confidence until she discovered that confidence could be pharmaceutical rather than earned. What does come next? She asks. Minjun looks at her with something new in his expression. Not the careful distance of two damaged people sharing space, but the tentative hope of someone who's beginning to imagine a future that doesn't revolve around guilt. Maybe we find out together. The phone call comes at 3 a.m. Seoul time, which means it's 2 p.m. in Chicago. Sarah's brother Marcus, her nephew's father, has been trying to reach her for months, but she's been too afraid to answer. Sarah? His voice sounds older, worn thin by grief and lawyers and the complicated process of rebuilding a life after losing a child. Hi, Marcus. Where the hell are you? Seoul. South Korea? Jesus, Sarah, I've been worried sick. You just disappeared after the hearing, and nobody knew if you were alive or... I'm alive. I'm okay. I'm getting better. The silence stretches across 13 time zones while Marcus processes this information. The charges were dropped, he says finally. Sarah sits up in bed, suddenly wide awake. What? The prosecutor couldn't prove criminal negligence. Your blood work from that day was clean, and the hospital records show you'd been sober for 6 weeks before Marcus's surgery. The medical board still suspended your license, but there won't be criminal charges. The news hits her like cold water. For 8 months, she's been running from prosecution that was apparently never going to materialize, carrying guilt over legal consequences that were never going to come. I was still impaired, she says quietly. Were you? Or were you just exhausted and grieving and human? Marcus, I failed. I couldn't save him. You couldn't save him because he couldn't be saved, Sarah. The autopsy showed that his heart defect was more extensive than anyone realized. 3 other cardiologists reviewed the case and said the same thing. Nobody could have done more than you did. Sarah begins to cry, months of held breath finally releasing. She's been carrying the weight of murder when what she actually committed was the crime of being imperfect in a moment when perfection might not have mattered anyway. I miss him, she whispers. So do I. Every day. But Sarah, he loved you so much. And he wouldn't want you to disappear from the world because you couldn't save him from something that couldn't be saved. When the call ends, Sarah sits in her small apartment, watching Seoul wake up through her window. The city moves with its usual purposeful energy. Millions of people beginning another day of trying to build something meaningful despite the weight of their mistakes. She calls Minjun. Can you meet me at the community center? She asks. Now? It's not open yet. I have a key. Dr. Park lets me borrow it sometimes when I need to think. An hour later, they sit in the empty music room, Sarah at the piano and Minjun with his guitar. But instead of playing, they simply exist in the silence of a space that's witnessed their gradual healing. My brother called, Sarah says. Good news or bad news? I'm not sure yet. Maybe both. She tells him about the dropped charges, about the medical review that concluded she couldn't have saved Marcus regardless of her sobriety, about the invitation to return to Chicago and begin the process of applying for license reinstatement. Are you going back? Minjun asks. I don't know. Part of me wants to, but part of me thinks I'm not the same person who could do that job anymore. Are you the same person who came here 8 months ago? Sarah considers this, looking at her hands resting on piano keys that no longer feel foreign beneath her fingers. No, I'm not. Then maybe the question isn't whether you can do the old job. Maybe it's what job the new Sarah wants to do. What about us? The question slips out before Sarah can stop it, carrying implications they've both been avoiding. What about us? If I go back to America, what happens to this? She gestures between them, encompassing months of shared music and gradual healing, and the slow-growing intimacy of 2 people learning to trust themselves by learning to trust each other. Minjun sets down his guitar and moves to sit beside her on the piano bench, close enough that she can feel the warmth of his body. This comes with you, if you want it to. Love doesn't have geographic requirements. The word love hangs between them like a song neither expected to hear. Sarah turns to look at him. This man who's taught her that healing can happen in small increments, that forgiveness can be practiced like scales until it becomes natural. Is that what this is? She asks. What else would you call it? Sarah thinks about the last 8 months, the way Minjun's presence has gradually taught her to trust her own hands again, the way making music together has reminded her that she's capable of creating beauty, even after causing destruction. I'd call it a miracle disguised as friendship, disguised as music lessons. That works too. Min-jun begins to play something on the piano, a melody Sarah recognizes as one of his originals, but arranged differently now, more complex and hopeful than when she first heard it. "You finished it," she says. "We finished it. You helped me find the ending." Sarah adds her own melody to his, their hands moving across the keys with the easy coordination of musicians who've learned each other's style through months of practice. The music they create is neither classical nor contemporary, neither Korean nor American, but something entirely their own. "So what happens now?" Sarah asks as the song ends. "Now we decide whether love is big enough to build a life on, or if we're just two people who needed each other to learn how to heal." Sarah looks at Min-jun, this gentle man who's taught her that strength can look like admitting weakness, that courage can sound like imperfect music played with sincere intention. "What if it's both?" she says. "Then we're the luckiest broken people in the world." The departure lounge at Incheon Airport feels like purgatory, a space between worlds where Sarah sits with her boarding pass to Chicago and her phone full of messages from Min-jun that she hasn't been able to answer. Text from Min-jun. "Are you sure about this?" Text from Min-jun. "We could figure out the visa situation. People do it all the time." Text from Min-jun. "I love you. That has to count for something." She loves him too. That's the problem. Sarah loves Min-jun enough to recognize that following her back to America would mean he'd be starting over in a foreign country, leaving behind the life he's carefully rebuilt in Seoul. And she loves herself enough now to know that staying in Korea to avoid dealing with her past isn't healing. It's just another form of running away. The flight to Chicago boards in 30 minutes. Sarah has a job interview lined up with a community health clinic, an apartment rented sight unseen, and the beginnings of a plan to rebuild her medical career from the ground up. It's the responsible choice, the grown-up decision that prioritizes long-term stability over short-term happiness. It's also the choice that's currently breaking her heart. Sarah Williams? She looks up to see a young Korean woman in a business suit, carrying a manila envelope, and wearing the kind of professional smile that suggests official business. "Yes? My name is Kim Yoo-jin. I'm an immigration attorney. Min-jun Park hired me to discuss some options with you before your flight." Sarah's heart does something complicated in her chest. "What kind of options?" Yoo-jin sits in the empty chair beside her and opens the manila envelope, spreading documents across the small table between airport seats. Option 1. You proceed with your original plan. Return to America, rebuild your career, and maintain a long-distance relationship with Min-jun while pursuing proper immigration channels for him to join you eventually. Timeline, approximately 2 to 3 years. Sarah nods. This is the plan she's been agonizing over for weeks. Option 2. You remain in Korea on a student visa while pursuing Korean language certification and medical training necessary to practice here. Min-jun has already identified several programs that would allow you to work in community health while studying. Timeline. Approximately 2 years until you're licensed to practice medicine in Korea. Sarah stares at the documents, visa applications, university program descriptions, housing information, all researched and organized with the thoroughness of someone who spent weeks thinking about logistics rather than just feelings. Option 3, Yoo-jin continues. You both come to America. Min-jun has been accepted to several graduate music programs, including one at Northwestern University, that would allow him to study music therapy while maintaining his performance career. You could complete your medical license reinstatement while he establishes himself professionally in Chicago. He applied to graduate school in America, Apparently, he's been learning English very seriously for the past few months. His TOEFL scores are quite impressive. Sarah feels tears gathering in her eyes. While she's been agonizing over whether their relationship could survive geographical separation, Minjun has been quietly researching ways to build a future that doesn't require anyone to sacrifice everything they've worked for. "Where is he?" she asks. "Terminal parking. He didn't want to pressure you, but he wanted you to know that whatever you choose, he's prepared to make it work." The boarding announcement for Sarah's flight echoes through the departure lounge. First-class passengers, then business class, then premium economy. Her row will be called in 10 minutes. "What would you do?" Sarah asks. Yujin smiles. Not her professional smile, but something warmer and more personal. "I met my husband when he was studying abroad in Seoul. We spent 2 years trying to decide whose country we'd build our life in. In the end, we realized we'd been asking the wrong question. What should we have been asking? Not where do we want to live, but how do we want to love? Geography is negotiable. The quality of your partnership is what determines whether you build something lasting." Sarah looks at the boarding pass in her hand, then at the visa applications spread across the table. 3 different futures, each requiring different kinds of courage and sacrifice. "If I choose option 2 or 3, she says slowly, "and it doesn't work out, if we're incompatible as a couple when we're not united by shared trauma, then I've made major life decisions based on a relationship that might not last." True. And if you choose option 1, and the long-distance relationship doesn't survive 2 years of video calls and expensive plane tickets, then you've chosen safety over the possibility of extraordinary happiness. The boarding announcement calls Sarah's row. Around her, passengers gather their carry-on luggage and form lines at the gate. How long do I have to decide? There's another flight to Chicago tomorrow night, and the next day and the day after that. But there's only one chance to find out what happens when 2 people who've learned to heal separately try to build something together. Sarah stands, her boarding pass still in her hand, and looks toward the gate where other passengers are disappearing into the jet bridge that will carry them back to their old lives. Then she looks at the visa applications, at the carefully researched evidence of a future she never let herself imagine. "Tell Minjun," she says, "that I need to make a phone call." The phone call to her brother Marcus is the hardest conversation Sarah has had since the night she told him their nephew was gone. But it's also the first conversation in 8 months where she feels like she's talking to family, rather than apologizing to a victim. "You sound different," Marcus says after she explains her decision to stay in Korea, at least temporarily. "Different how?" "Like yourself. Like the Sarah I grew up with, before medical school turned you into someone who thought she had to be perfect all the time." The observation hits her with unexpected force. Sarah realizes that for years before her addiction, she'd been carrying the weight of other people's expectations, trying to be the brilliant doctor who never made mistakes, rather than the human being who was doing her best with impossible circumstances. "I'm scared," she admits. "Of what?" "Of making another major life decision for the wrong reasons. What if I'm staying because I'm still running away from real responsibility? What if I'm choosing love over duty because love feels easier?" Marcus is quiet for a moment, and Sarah can hear children playing in the background. His neighbor's kids, probably, since his own child isn't coming home from school anymore. "Sarah, you spent your entire adult life choosing duty over everything else. Over sleep, over relationships, over your own mental health. Maybe it's time to find out what happens when you choose something else first. But what if I'm wrong? What if Minjun and I don't work out as a couple when we're not just helping each other heal? What if I give up my American medical career for a relationship that falls apart in 6 months? Then you'll figure out what comes next. Just like you figured out how to survive losing your nephew, and your career, and your sense of who you were. You're stronger than you think, Sarah. And you're allowed to want things for yourself. When the call ends, Sarah sits in the airport corridor with her boarding pass still in her hand. Other flights are boarding around her, other people moving toward their chosen futures with the confidence of people who know where they belong. She thinks about Marcus, her nephew, not her brother, and the conversation they had the night before his surgery. He'd been scared but trying to hide it, asking questions about what would happen if the operation didn't work. Then we'll try something else, she'd told him. There's always another option, always another way to fight. Maybe that's still true. Maybe there's more than one way to honor his memory, more than one way to live a meaningful life. Maybe choosing love over geography is an abandonment of duty. Maybe it's expansion of purpose. Sarah walks back to where Yujin is waiting with the visa applications. Option 2, she says. I want to try building something here, with him, in the place where we both learned how to heal. Are you sure? Sarah looks toward the terminal parking garage, where Minjun is waiting with the patience of someone who's learned that the best things in life can't be rushed or forced. I'm sure that I want to find out. And for the first time in my adult life, that feels like enough. 2 years later, Dr. Sarah Williams speaks Korean well enough to take medical histories and prescribe medications, though her patients still smile at her American accent when she attempts complex grammar. The community clinic in Hongdae has expanded to include a small surgery suite, where Sarah performs minor procedures with hands that learn to be steady again through piano practice and trust exercises disguised as love. Minjun teaches music therapy at Seoul National University 3 days a week and performs with the Seoul Chamber Orchestra on weekends. His street corner busking has evolved into something he chooses rather than something that chooses him, a way to stay connected to the raw honesty of music that saved his life. Their apartment in Bukchon Hanok village isn't grand, but it's theirs. Traditional wooden beams frame modern conveniences, and every room carries the sound of music. Sarah practicing scales in the morning, Minjun composing in the afternoon, both of them playing together in the evenings like a conversation that never ends. The new students are remarkable this semester, Minjun says, setting down his guitar after an evening session. There's a young man with severe PTSD from military service. He hasn't spoken in months, but when I gave him drumsticks, he played for 2 hours straight. Sarah looks up from her medical journals, where she's been reading about innovative surgical techniques she hopes to implement at the clinic. Music reaches places that words can't touch. You taught me that. You taught yourself. I just provided the piano. This is their rhythm now. The gentle back and forth of two people who've learned to heal separately and choose to build together. Sarah's visa status has been resolved through her medical work, and Minjun's international reputation has opened doors to performance opportunities around the world. But Seoul remains their anchor, the city where they learn to trust their hands and hearts again. Sarah's phone buzzes with a message from Marcus in Chicago. The hospital board wants to meet with you. Full reinstatement department head position. Think about it? She shows the message to Minjun, who reads it without the panic that would have accompanied such news 2 years ago. Are you interested? He asks. In the job? Maybe. In leaving Seoul? No. Chicago has excellent music schools. Seoul has you. The simplicity of the statement carries the weight of everything they've built together. Not just their relationship, but their individual healing, their shared purpose. their daily choice to remain vulnerable enough for love to continue growing. "There's something I need to tell you," Sarah says, setting aside her journals. "Good something, or concerning something. Terrifying something. Wonderful something." She takes his hands, these calloused musical hands that taught her to make beauty from brokenness. "I'm pregnant." The words hang in the air like the first note of a symphony, full of promise and possibility. Minjun's face cycles through surprise, joy, and a flash of the old fear before settling into something that looks like wonder. "Are you sure?" 3 tests, sure. Doctor visit, sure. 8 weeks, sure. "And you're happy?" "Terrified and happy." "You?" Minjun pulls her close, his embrace careful and complete. "Terrified and grateful and so in love with you that I can't believe we're going to have a family." They sit together in their small living room, processing the magnitude of creating new life when they're still learning to trust their own. Outside, Seoul hums with its endless energy. But inside their Hanok sanctuary, 2 people contemplate the miracle of choosing hope over fear, growth over safety, the future over the past that nearly destroyed them both. The pregnancy brings unexpected challenges alongside its joys. Sarah's morning sickness is severe enough to affect her work schedule, and Minjun struggles with anxiety about becoming a father when his own childhood was complicated by family expectations and artistic pressure. "What if I'm terrible at it?" he asks during one of their evening talks, his hand resting on Sarah's still small bump. "What if I pass on the wrong things? The perfectionism, the fear of failure, the need to earn love through achievement. Then we'll figure it out together," Sarah says simply. "The same way we've figured out everything else." Doctor. Park has become not just Sarah's mentor at the clinic, but a father figure who helps navigate the intersection of American directness and Korean subtlety that shapes their daily life. When Sarah mentions her concerns about raising a bicultural child, he offers wisdom born from his own struggles with loss and healing. "Children don't need perfect parents," he tells her during a quiet moment between patients. "They need present parents. They need adults who show up consistently, who admit their mistakes, who demonstrate that love is a choice made daily, rather than a feeling that exists automatically." The advice resonates because it describes what Sarah and Minjun have built together. Not effortless compatibility, but the intentional choice to remain committed to each other's healing and growth. Halmoni Choi has become an unofficial grandmother, bringing homemade soup when Sarah's morning sickness is particularly bad, and teaching Minjun traditional lullabies that his own mother never sang to him. "This child," she says, patting Sarah's belly with gentle authority, "will be born into music and medicine. Very powerful combination. Very lucky baby." As autumn arrives in Seoul, painting the city in shades of gold and red, Sarah and Minjun begin the practical preparations for parenthood. They convert the small room that once housed Minjun's music equipment into a nursery, choosing soft colors and simple furniture that will grow with their child. "I want them to love music," Minjun says, assembling a crib with the same careful attention he brings to tuning his guitar, "but not need it the way I needed it. I want it to be joy, not survival." "I want them to understand healing," Sarah adds, folding tiny clothes that seem impossibly small, but not carry the weight of other people's pain. "I want medicine to be service, not penance." These conversations become their evening ritual, imagining the person they're creating not just biologically, but emotionally and spiritually. They talk about raising a child who will be equally comfortable in Seoul's traditional temples and Chicago's medical centers, who will speak 3 languages, Korean, English, and music, fluently. The second trimester brings relief from morning sickness and the first flutters of movement that make their abstract hope concrete reality. Minjun cries the first time he feels the baby kick, his hands pressed against Sarah's belly with reverent amazement. "They're strong," he whispers. Like their parents' love for each other. If you're already rooting for them, subscribe to not miss the next surprising turns. Winter arrives early in Seoul, covering their neighborhood in pristine snow that muffles the city's constant noise. Sarah's pregnancy progresses smoothly despite her advanced age, and Minjun's anxiety has transformed into excited preparation. He's been composing lullabies, simple melodies that he hums while cooking dinner or reading medical journals aloud to Sarah's growing belly. "I think they prefer your voice to mine," Sarah observes during one of these impromptu concerts. "They always settle down when you start singing." Smart baby, already demonstrating excellent taste in music. The joke masks a deeper truth. Minjun has found unexpected peace in the prospect of fatherhood. After years of believing he was too damaged to deserve family happiness, he's discovered that healing doesn't require perfection, just commitment to continuing growth. Christmas brings their first major decision as expectant parents: where to spend the holiday. Sarah's brother Marcus has been asking her to visit Chicago, eager to rebuild their relationship and meet the man who helped his sister find happiness again. Minjun's parents have extended a formal invitation to Seoul, their first acknowledgement of their son's relationship after years of polite distance. "We could stay here," Sarah suggests. "Just us, quiet celebration, no family drama." "Or we could be brave," Minjun counters. "Show them both that we've built something real." They choose bravery, hosting Christmas dinner in their small apartment for an unlikely gathering. Marcus, who flies in from Chicago, Minjun's parents, who arrive with expensive gifts and careful politeness, Dr. Park and Halmoni Choi, who have become their chosen family, and several colleagues from the clinic and university. The evening is initially awkward, with language barriers and cultural differences creating uncomfortable silences. But music becomes the universal translator. When Minjun plays guitar and Sarah accompanies on their small upright piano, their guests relax into appreciation for the beauty these two damaged people have created together. "My sister looks happy," Marcus tells Minjun during a quiet moment on the apartment's small balcony. "Really happy. Not just pretending to be okay." "She saved my life," Minjun replies simply. "I'm trying to make sure I deserve that gift. From what I can see, you already do." Minjun's mother approaches Sarah while she's preparing tea in the kitchen, her formal demeanor softened by wine and the evening's gentle atmosphere. "I misjudged you initially," she says in careful English. "I thought my son was choosing music over stability, emotion over practical considerations. But I see now that he chose healing. He chose love that makes him better rather than smaller." The admission carries the weight of Korean maternal approval, something Minjun has never received for his life choices. When Sarah repeats the conversation later, he sits in stunned silence for several minutes. "She said I chose correctly? She said you chose love that makes you better, which is the most accurate description of what we have that I've ever heard." The evening ends with promises of future visits and the gradual recognition that family can be expanded through choice as well as blood. As their guests leave, Sarah and Minjun clean dishes and process the milestone of successfully navigating their first major social event as a unit. 7 months until the baby comes, Sarah says, drying wine glasses with careful attention. 7 months to figure out how to be parents who don't repeat their own parents' mistakes. 7 months to practice showing up for each other when things get complicated. We're already good at that part. The baby chooses that moment to deliver a particularly strong kick, as if agreeing with their assessment. They laugh at the timing, this child already participating in family conversations from the safety of Sarah's womb. Spring arrives with unusual warmth, coaxing cherry blossoms into early bloom throughout Seoul. Sarah's pregnancy has reached the uncomfortable final weeks where sleep is elusive and every movement requires strategic planning. Min-jun has become hypervigilant, timing contractions that turn out to be false alarms and consulting pregnancy books with the obsessive thoroughness he once reserved for musical practice. "You know I'm a doctor, right?" Sarah teases during one of his midnight research sessions. "I do understand how childbirth works. You're a cardiologist who specializes in adult hearts. This is different. This is you channeling anxiety into preparation, which is very sweet and completely unnecessary." But his attention touches something deep in Sarah's heart. The evidence that this man who once believed he couldn't trust his own hands now trusts himself completely with her well-being and their child's future. The contractions begin during a Tuesday morning clinic session, mild enough that Sarah finishes examining her patient before mentioning them to Dr. Park. "False alarm?" he asks with the calm of someone who's delivered advice about labor pains countless times. Maybe. Probably. They're not regular yet. By afternoon, the contractions have established a rhythm that makes denial impossible. Sarah calls Min-jun, who's teaching a music therapy session at the university, and delivers the news with medical precision. Contractions every 8 minutes, lasting about 45 seconds each. We should probably head to the hospital soon. "I'm leaving now. Don't move. Don't do anything strenuous. Just breathe." "Min-jun, I'm not going to give birth in the clinic waiting room. We have time." But when he arrives 20 minutes later, slightly out of breath from running through Seoul traffic, his panic is so endearing that Sarah doesn't have the heart to tease him about it. The taxi ride to Seoul National University Hospital is surreal. The same medical center where Sarah once worked as a visiting physician, now returning as a patient about to give birth to the child of a man she met through shared trauma and music therapy. Labor progresses steadily through the afternoon and into evening, with Min-jun providing constant support that ranges from practical, timing contractions, communicating with medical staff in Korean, to emotional, playing soft guitar music between contractions, reminding Sarah to breathe through the pain. "I can't do this," Sarah gasps during the most intense phase of labor. "You've already done the hardest part," Min-jun says, his voice steady despite the tears on his face. "You've built a life worth living. Now you're bringing new life into it. What if I'm terrible at being a mother? What if you're amazing at it? What if this child is exactly what the world needs? Someone raised by parents who know what it feels like to be broken and choose healing anyway." The encouragement carries her through the final pushes, and at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in April, their daughter enters the world with healthy lungs and an indignant cry that suggests she's not entirely pleased with the transition from womb to world. "She's perfect," the doctor announces in Korean, placing the baby on Sarah's chest. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and very strong voice. Min-jun stares at his daughter, their daughter, with an expression of wonder that transforms his face completely. This man who spent years believing he didn't deserve happiness now holds proof that healing can create new life, that love can literally grow a family from two broken people willing to choose each other daily. "What should we call her?" Sarah asks, studying the tiny face that somehow combines features from both parents, despite their different ethnicities. "Ji-un," Min-jun says quietly, After the woman who taught me that love requires courage. And Sarah, after the woman who taught me that courage requires practice. Ji-eun Sarah Park Williams, Sarah repeats, testing how the name sounds. It's perfect. The first night in the hospital passes in a haze of feeding attempts, diaper changes, and the overwhelming responsibility of caring for someone so completely dependent. But between the practical challenges, there are moments of pure magic. Ji-eun sleeping peacefully between her parents, Min-jun humming lullabies he composed during the pregnancy, Sarah marveling at the tiny fingers that grip her thumb with instinctive trust. I love her so much it's frightening, Sarah admits during a 3 a.m. feeding session. I love both of you so much that I understand why people write songs about it. Min-jun replies, everything I thought I knew about love was just preparation for this. The first months of parenthood pass in a symphony of sleepless nights, first smiles, and the gradual recognition that they've created not just a baby, but a family with its own rhythms and rituals. Ji-eun proves to be an attentive audience for her father's music, settling into peaceful sleep whenever Min-jun plays guitar and showing signs of inherited musical sensitivity. She definitely has your ear for melody, Sarah observes, watching their 3-month-old daughter track the sound of piano music with focused attention. She has your stubborn streak. Look at how she refuses to sleep unless the conditions are exactly right. That's not stubborn, that's discriminating. She knows what she likes. Their apartment has been transformed to accommodate new life. The traditional Korean furniture supplemented with modern baby equipment. The music room reorganized to include a crib where Ji-eun can nap while her parents practice. The soundproofing they installed helps maintain neighborly relations during nighttime crying sessions. Sarah returns to work at the clinic part-time when Ji-eun is 4 months old, a decision that requires careful coordination of schedules and the support of their extended chosen family. Halmoni Choi provides childcare with the competent love of someone who's helped raise neighborhood children for decades. This baby, she declares, holding Ji-eun with practiced ease. She will be special. Music in her bones, healing in her heart, 2 countries in her soul. Very powerful combination. Min-jun's music therapy work has expanded to include research on early childhood development and the impact of musical exposure on infant brain development. Ji-eun becomes his most willing research subject, responding to different musical styles with clear preferences that he documents with scientific precision. She prefers classical music during feeding times, but folk songs for falling asleep. He reports to Sarah with the excitement of someone making groundbreaking discoveries. And she definitely recognizes my voice versus recordings. Her heart rate changes when I sing live versus when I play recordings of my singing. She knows her appa's voice. That's not research, that's love. The observation touches the part of Min-jun that still sometimes doubts his worthiness for this happiness. Watching Ji-eun respond to his presence with obvious joy and comfort confirms what Sarah has been telling him for years. He's not too broken to be trusted with precious things. Their relationship continues to deepen through the challenges of new parenthood. Sleep deprivation tests their patience, and the constant demands of caring for an infant leave little time for the long conversations and musical evenings that brought them together. But they adapt, finding new ways to connect in the spaces between feeding schedules and diaper changes. I miss our old life sometimes, Sarah admits one evening as they finally sit down together after Ji-eun's bedtime routine. Do you regret this? No, never. I miss the simplicity, but I wouldn't trade the complexity. This is harder and more wonderful than anything I imagined possible. Even when she cries for 3 hours straight and nothing we do helps. Especially then. because we figure it out together, because she trusts us to keep trying until we find what she needs. The statement encapsulates what they've learned about love through parenthood. It's not about being naturally gifted at meeting someone else's needs, but about being committed to persistent creative effort until you discover what works. By Ji-eun's first birthday, their small apartment has become the center of a thriving community. Sarah's medical practice has expanded to include prenatal care for other expatriate women, and Minjun's music therapy program has gained international attention for its innovative approaches to trauma recovery. The birthday party they host reflects the multicultural family they've created. Colleagues from the clinic, students from Minjun's university program, neighbors from their Hanok village, and video calls from Marcus in Chicago and Minjun's parents who are traveling in Japan. Ji-eun navigates the celebration with the confident curiosity of a toddler who's grown up surrounded by music and medical conversation. She babbles in what sounds like a mixture of Korean and English, responds to her name in both languages, and shows clear musical preferences when different guests offer to entertain her. She's definitely going to be bilingual, Sarah observes, watching Ji-eun interact with Korean-speaking guests with the same comfort she shows English speakers. Trilingual, Minjun corrects. Don't forget her native fluency in music. The joke reflects a deeper truth about the child they're raising. Ji-eun is growing up bicultural by design, with parents committed to ensuring she feels equally at home in Korean and American contexts. They speak both languages at home, celebrate holidays from both cultures, and plan regular visits to Chicago so she maintains connections to Sarah's family. The visa extension came through, Sarah mentions during a quiet moment while Ji-eun naps. Another 3 years, with option to apply for permanent residency. Are you thinking about it? Permanent residency? Are you thinking about it? Marriage? The question they've been dancing around for months finally surfaces. They've been partners in every meaningful sense for over 2 years, parents together for 1 year, but their relationship still technically lacks legal recognition in ways that matter for parental rights and immigration status. I've been thinking about it daily, Minjun admits. Not because I doubt what we have, but because I want it recognized officially. I want Ji-eun to have legal security, and I want you to have permanent status if that's what you choose. And personally, what do you want personally? I want to marry my best friend who happens to be the mother of my child, and the person who taught me that healing is possible. I want to promise publicly what I've been proving privately, that I choose you every day, in every way that matters. The proposal is typically Minjun, thoughtful, practical, and deeply romantic without being theatrical. Sarah's answer comes not in words, but in the kiss that tastes like birthday cake and promises, and the kind of happiness that grows stronger rather than weaker over time. The wedding ceremony they plan is small and perfectly suited to the life they've built together. The Bukchon Hanok Village Community Center provides the venue, with traditional Korean architecture creating an elegant backdrop for vows that will be spoken in both languages. Dr. Park officiates with the authority of someone who's watched their relationship develop from traumatic healing to genuine partnership. Halmoni Choi serves as grandmother of the bride, groom, and baby, her role in their family officially recognized through her prominent place in the ceremony. Marcus flies in from Chicago to walk Sarah down the aisle, a role he approaches with the emotional weight of someone who's watched his sister recover from devastating loss and find unexpected joy. Minjun's parents attend with genuine warmth, their initial reservations about their son's unconventional path replaced by respect for the family he's created. Ji-eun, now walking confidently at 13 months, serves as flower girl with the enthusiastic cooperation of someone who enjoys scattering petals and being the center of attention. She's dressed in a miniature hanbok that matches her father's traditional Korean wedding attire, while Sarah wears a dress that combines Western elegance with Korean-inspired details. The vows they've written reflect the journey that brought them together and the future they're choosing to build. Sarah, Minjun begins, his voice carrying clearly across the intimate gathering. You taught me that broken hands can learn to create beauty again, that damaged hearts can choose to love without guarantees, and that the most powerful healing happens when we stop trying to fix ourselves alone and start building something together. I promise to choose you, to choose our family, to choose growth over fear, truth over comfort, music over silence, every day for the rest of our lives. Sarah's response carries the authority of someone who's learned to trust her own judgment again. Minjun, you showed me that loneliness is not a life sentence, that healing is not a destination but a daily practice, that love is not about finding someone who completes you, but about choosing to complete each other. I promise to choose you, to choose our daughter, to choose courage over safety, hope over despair, harmony over discord, every day for the rest of our lives. The ceremony concludes with music, Minjun playing guitar, while Sarah accompanies on a small keyboard, performing a duet they composed together during her pregnancy. Ji-eun claps enthusiastically from Halmoni Choi's arms, adding her own musical commentary to her parents' performance. The reception is equally intimate, featuring Korean traditional music alongside American folk songs, Korean cuisine alongside Chicago deep dish pizza, flown in specially for Marcus, and toasts that span 3 languages, including Ji-eun's enthusiastic babbling. To second chances, Marcus raises his glass, his voice thick with emotion. To the healing that happens when we're brave enough to love again. To my sister who chose hope over fear, and to Minjun who chose my sister right back. To chosen family, Dr. Park adds. To the people who show up consistently, who celebrate growth and support struggle, who prove that love is both a feeling and a decision made daily. To music, Halmoni Choi concludes with the wisdom of someone who's lived through decades of joy and sorrow. To the universal language that brought these 2 hearts together and will carry their family through whatever comes next. 40. As evening settles over Seoul, the newlyweds dance to music played by colleagues and friends, their daughter sleeping peacefully in a carrier against Minjun's chest. The image captures everything they've built together. Love that includes rather than excludes, family that grows through addition rather than replacement, happiness that deepens rather than diminishes with time. 2 years into marriage, the Park Williams household has found its permanent rhythm. Sarah has been offered the position of medical director at the Hongdae Clinic, a role that would make her one of the few foreign-born medical administrators in Seoul. Minjun's research on music therapy for trauma survivors has been published internationally, establishing him as a leading voice in the field. Ji-eun, now 3 years old, speaks Korean and English with equal fluency and has begun showing the musical gifts both parents hoped for and feared. She picks out melodies on the piano by ear, sings complex songs with perfect pitch, and shows the kind of intuitive musical understanding that suggests genuine talent rather than just parental wishful thinking. She's going to be better than both of us, Minjun observes, watching their daughter improvise variations on a simple nursery rhyme. She's going to be herself, Sarah corrects, which might include music, but won't be defined by our expectations about music. The distinction matters to both parents, who are determined to support Ji-eun's natural gifts without creating the pressure that damaged Minjun's relationship with music during his childhood. They expose her to various instruments and musical styles, but they also ensure she has non-musical interests and friendships. Today at school, Teacher Kim said I could play piano for the spring concert, Ji-yoon announces during dinner, her 3-year-old pronunciation carefully enunciating each Korean syllable. Do you want to play piano for the spring concert? Sarah asks. Yes, but I want to play the song you and Appa made for me, not the baby songs the other kids play. The song they made for her is a composition that emerged organically during bedtime routines. Minjun on guitar, Sarah on piano, both of them improvising melodies while Ji-yoon added vocals that somehow always found the perfect harmony. It's become her signature piece, the musical expression of her unique position as a child raised by 2 cultures, 2 languages, and 2 parents who found each other through healing. That's a special song for our family, Minjun explains. Are you sure you want to share it with everyone at school? I want them to hear how beautiful our family sounds together. The simple statement captures something profound about the child they're raising. She views their multicultural, musically centered household not as complicated or different, but as beautiful and worth sharing. Her confidence about their family's value reflects the security they've worked to create. The spring concert becomes a milestone for all 3 family members. Ji-yoon performs their family song with the natural stage presence of someone who's grown up making music without fear or self-consciousness. Sarah and Minjun accompany her, creating a moment of pure joy that has nothing to do with professional achievement and everything to do with love expressed through shared creativity. After the performance, they're approached by other parents whose children have been inspired by Ji-yoon's confidence and musical ability. Several ask about piano lessons. Others inquire about music therapy for their own children who struggle with anxiety or developmental challenges. You could start a family music program, suggests Mrs. Lee, whose daughter has been Ji-yoon's best friend since they started school together. Something for children and parents together, focusing on emotional development through music rather than just technical skill. The idea plants itself in Sarah and Minjun's minds like a seed waiting for the right season to grow. They've both been looking for ways to expand their professional impact while maintaining the family-centered life they've built. A program that combines Sarah's medical understanding of child development with Minjun's expertise in music therapy could serve families throughout Seoul. We could call it Healing Harmonies, Sarah suggests during one of their evening planning sessions. Music therapy for families dealing with trauma, cultural transition, developmental challenges, or growing through music, Minjun counters. Something that emphasizes growth rather than just healing from damage. Why not both? Different programs for different needs, all based on the same principle. Music as a bridge between people, cultures, and emotional states. The conversation continues over weeks and months, gradually developing from abstract idea to concrete business plan. They envision a center that would serve Korean families dealing with modern stressors, expatriate families navigating cultural adaptation, and children with various developmental needs who might benefit from musical intervention. The Healing Harmonies Center opens on a crisp October morning in a renovated hanok near their own neighborhood. The space combines traditional Korean architectural elements with modern soundproofing and medical equipment, creating an environment that feels both professional and warmly welcoming. Their first clients are a mixture of families they've worked with individually, patients from Sarah's clinic whose children need developmental support, students from Minjun's university program who want to continue therapy in a family context, and referrals from other medical professionals who've heard about their innovative approach. "This is perfect," whispers Mrs. Chen, watching her 4-year-old son participate in a group session designed for children with autism spectrum disorders. He's never been comfortable in social situations, but look at how he responds to the music. The boy in question is playing a simple drum pattern with 3 other children, their individual rhythms combining into a complex polyrhythm that somehow accommodates each child's different processing speeds and social comfort levels. Minjun guides the session with gentle encouragement, while Sarah monitors each child's stress responses and engagement levels. Ji-yoon, now 4 years old, often observes the sessions with the serious attention of someone studying her future profession. She's not formally part of the therapy programs, but her natural ability to connect with children of all ages makes her an unofficial assistant who somehow helps other children feel more comfortable in the unfamiliar environment. "I think she's going to be a music therapist like her appa," Sarah observes, watching Ji-eun demonstrate a simple rhythm to a shy 6-year-old who's been reluctant to participate. "I think she's going to be whatever helps people heal, like both her parents," Minjun corrects. "Music therapy, medicine, teaching, or something we haven't imagined yet." The center's success exceeds their most optimistic projections. Within 6 months, they have a waiting list for family programs and inquiries from other cities about franchising their model. International visitors come to observe their methods, and Minjun is invited to present their research at conferences throughout Asia. But the real measure of their impact comes through individual stories. The 7-year-old who starts speaking again after months of selective mutism. The teenage refugee who finds community through drumming circles. The elderly stroke patient who regains motor coordination through piano exercises adapted for limited mobility. "We're not just treating individuals," Sarah reflects during one of their monthly staff meetings. "We're treating family systems, cultural disconnection, intergenerational trauma." Music becomes the common language that helps people understand each other across differences that usually divide them. The observation captures what they've learned through building both their family and their professional practice. Healing happens in relationship, and music creates the kind of nonverbal connection that allows trust to develop even when language barriers or emotional damage make traditional communication difficult. Their personal relationship continues to deepen alongside their professional collaboration. They've learned to navigate the challenges of working together while maintaining romantic partnership, and they've discovered that shared purpose enhances rather than threatens their marriage. "I love watching you work with the families," Minjun tells Sarah after a particularly successful session with a family dealing with childhood cancer. "You have this way of seeing each person's medical needs while never losing sight of their emotional context." "I love watching you with the children who've been told they're difficult or unteachable," Sarah responds. "You see their musical potential before anyone else recognizes it exists." These mutual appreciation conversations have become as much a part of their relationship as shared musical practice and collaborative parenting. They've learned to actively celebrate each other's professional growth, rather than competing for recognition or feeling threatened by their partner's success. 5 years after that first rainy night when a broken American doctor stopped to listen to a Korean street musician, the Park Williams family has created something neither Sarah nor Minjun could have imagined when they were individual survivors learning to trust their damaged hearts and hands. Ji-yoon, now 7 years old, performs with the Seoul Children's Orchestra while maintaining straight A's in both her Korean and English academic subjects. She speaks 3 languages fluently, Korean, English, and music, and serves as a cultural bridge in her international school where children from dozens of countries learn together. "I want to be a doctor musician like Ayama and Appa," she announces during a career day presentation that draws laughter and applause from classmates who've grown accustomed to her family's unusual combination of healing arts. Sarah has been appointed to Seoul's International Medical Advisory Board, where she helps develop healthcare policies for the city's growing expatriate population. Her research on cross-cultural medical practice has been published in journals throughout Asia and North America, establishing her as a leading voice in culturally competent healthcare. Minjun's music therapy program has expanded to include a graduate degree track at Seoul National University, training the next generation of therapists who will serve an increasingly diverse Korean population. His compositions for therapeutic use have been recorded and distributed internationally, providing healing tools for practitioners worldwide. The Healing Harmonies Center now occupies 3 locations throughout Seoul, with plans for expansion to Busan and Daegu. Their waiting lists remain long, but they've trained enough staff to serve hundreds of families while maintaining the personalized approach that made their original program successful. But beyond professional achievements and institutional recognition, the real measure of their success lives in the daily rhythms of their family life. Morning coffee shared while Ji-eun practices piano, evening conversations about the day's challenges and victories, weekend adventures that combine Seoul's traditional cultural sites with contemporary arts venues. Do you ever miss the simplicity of our old lives? Sarah asks Minjun during one of their rare quiet evenings alone while Ji-eun sleeps over with friends. Do you mean, do I miss the loneliness and despair disguised as simplicity? He responds with a smile. Not even for a moment. I miss some things about America sometimes. Deep dish pizza, autumn leaves in Lincoln Park, the way Marcus laughs at his own jokes. We could visit more often, or they could visit more often. Distance doesn't have to mean disconnection. The suggestion reflects how much they've both learned about maintaining relationships across cultural and geographical boundaries. Their marriage has taught them that love requires active effort rather than passive assumption, that families can be built through choice as well as biology, that healing is possible even after devastating loss. There's something I should tell you, Sarah says, her tone shifting to carry the weight of important news. Good something or concerning something? Life-changing something? Wonderful something? She takes his hand with the same gesture she used 5 years ago when telling him about their first pregnancy. I'm pregnant again. The announcement brings the same cycle of surprise, joy, and protective concern that accompanied Ji-eun's conception, but with the added confidence of parents who've successfully navigated the challenges of raising one child while building careers and maintaining their relationship. Are you happy? Minjun asks, his hand moving instinctively to rest on her still flat stomach. Terrified and happy. You? Terrified and grateful, and wondering how we got lucky enough to have this choice twice. Not lucky, Sarah corrects. Intentional. We chose each other. We chose healing. We chose to build something together instead of just surviving separately. As Seoul settles into sleep around them, they sit together planning for a future that will include 2 children, expanded professional responsibilities, and the continued daily choice to prioritize love over fear, growth over safety, harmony over discord. The music that brought them together, that first rain-soaked evening when broken hands found their way to healing through shared melodies, continues to play through their lives, not just in their professional work or their daughter's obvious talents, but in the rhythm of ordinary days, made extraordinary by the presence of people who've learned to trust each other completely. Outside their windows, 8 million people pursue their own complicated relationships with love and loss, and the courage to rebuild after devastating mistakes. But in their Hanok sanctuary, A family sleeps peacefully in the security of truth, finally told, and love finally acknowledged. She believed her loneliness would never end, until a quiet musician found the music her soul hid. And together they discovered that sometimes the most beautiful symphonies are written not by individual artists, but by broken people willing to harmonize their healing into something larger than either could create alone. The silence has ended. The music continues. And love, as it turns out, is the song that never stops playing for those brave enough to keep listening. What music is your soul hiding that needs to be heard? In Seoul, where ancient traditions meet modern dreams, two wounded hearts found that healing isn't about becoming unbroken. It's about learning to make beautiful music with the pieces that remain. Their love story proves that sometimes the most powerful medicine is simply someone who understands your pain and chooses to stay anyway, creating harmony from the spaces where words are insufficient and only music can bridge the distance between souls.